today? I hope you're doing great. Are you ready to spend some time together? Do you wish that someone you see often change? If they did, they would be easier to get along with. You spend your whole life trying to help them to change, but results are few, so you're very frustrated. Today I'm going to tell you a naughty story about Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle. I will use real-life examples, not actual cases, to illustrate the meaning of the story.
Dr. Rita, can you tell us the Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle story?
Certainly. Mr. Green Square had lots of friends. Some were shaped like circles, others like squares, and still others like triangles. Whenever they could, they all hang out together, swapping stories, telling jokes, and laughing till they got cramps. One day at the park, Mr. Green Square saw Miss Green Circle, an attractive girl he hadn't noticed before. He walked over, introduced himself, and a magical electrical feeling immediately connected the two. Truly, he thought to himself, this must be indeed be love at the first sight. Later that night, Mr. Green Square had a hard time getting to sleep because he could not get Miss Green Circle out of his mind. Even when he closed his eyes, it seems as though she was still there before him. After several nights of this, he could stand it no longer and gave Miss Green Circle a call to see if she would go out with him. She accepted, and thus began their dating journey. Every day they talked on the phone, listening intently to each other's stories, learning about each other's past, telling how their workday went, and talking about their future dreams. It didn't bother them that they were different shapes because their interest in each other was so intense that their shapes were simply not an issue. They were in love, and as far as they were concerned, that's all that mattered. About a year later, Mr. Green Square asked Miss Green Circle to marry him. And without hesitation, she said yes. They could hardly wait for the big day to arrive. Miss Green Circle wasted no time in wedding preparation. After they were married, things started to change. Miss Green Circle began to tell Mr. Green Square how to act and what to say. She expected him to act like a circle, so he could fit in her family. Likewise, Mr. Green Square expected his wife to behave as though she was a square. After all, how did she expect to ever fit in with his family if she continued to behave like a circle? Let's look at the shape that Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle represent. Square have different properties. Square have 4 sides and 4 angles, while circle have no side and no angles. Can a square change to a circle? Imagine a sponge in the shape of a square. You can try to push the corner in, attempt to change its shape into a circle. But once you let go, the corner will stick out again. Now imagine the sponge in the shape of a circle. You could stretch the circle into 4 directions to form a square, but it will go right back to the shape of a circle. Since both shapes have different properties, it's really impossible to change the circle into square or square into circle. Is it realistic for Mr. Green Square to try to change Miss Green Circle into square? Or is it possible for Miss Green Circle to change Mr. Green Square into circle? Try as they may, it is impossible to change their partner because they each have different characteristics. When Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle gave up trying to change the other, they were much happier. In real life, one individual simply cannot change another person. One person may try to change, but eventually he will go right back to his own person. Now let's talk about fixers, people who like to change others. Do you know a fixer? Are you fixers yourself?
Fixers in couples.
One day, a hypothetical couple, Jim and Jane, are arguing about money. Jane was almost in tears as she talked.
We're working so hard during the week. I want to do something fun on the weekends. You complain that we're spending too much money for this. It's no fun being with you because it's always about money. I can't spend any money for anything I want without listening to you complain.
All you want to do is have fun. The housework is neglected because we only have time to clean on the weekends. Besides, we need to save money for our future.
They each believed they were right and the other person needed to change. They thought, only if the other person changed to be more like me, then things would be better between us. You see, they have different family backgrounds. Jim had many brothers and sisters. His parents worked several jobs but didn't earn enough to support the family. Sometimes they had trouble putting food on the table. Jim worked during high school to help with expenses. Since he was the oldest son, he often had to care for his siblings and seldom had time to hang out with friends. However, Jane's family was well off, had extra money to use for entertainment. They often spent weekends doing something fun, such as dining out, watching movies, going for short trips. With the different backgrounds in mind, I told Jim and Jane that I was going to use a square to represent Jim and a circle to represent Jane. I asked them, can you change a square into circle or circle into square? Jim replied, that's impossible. A square has 4 sides and 4 angles, and circle have no sides and no angles. Then I asked, if your wife is a circle and you are a square, can you change her into square? He replied, I guess not. I then said, assume that Jane is not going to change because she's a circle. She needs to have fun on weekends. What can you do to adapt her differences? Well, I could be more generous because we both work full-time. I could budget each month for entertainment. I asked Jane what she could do if Jim wasn't going to change. She said they could clean the house together on Saturday morning before they're going out. She also said she would find fun things to do within the entertainment budget. When Jim and Jane finally stopped trying to change each other and accepted their differences, they became content individuals and very happy couple. Here was another hypothetical couple, Jack and Jill, who were fighting about their kids' schedule. Jill, an organizer, was going to pick up their daughter Jenny from school and take her to piano lesson. Jim would get Tommy from the daycare. They both agreed with this plan. Jim was a carefree and a spur-of-the-moment kind of person. On this day, he left work early and thought he would do Jill a favor by picking up Jenny from school and take her to piano lesson. But when Jill went to school to pick up Jenny, teacher told her that Jack had picked her up. She was angry and yelled at Jack on the phone.
Why did you change our plan picking the kids up?
I thought I was doing you a favor. I got out of work early, so I figured I'd go get the kids and drop them off for you. But I just hadn't had a chance to call you yet. Why are you always making things bigger than they really are?
They argued back and forth. Neither wanted to change their view, but they each wanted the other person to change. This is not a right or wrong issue, but rather a personality issue. Jack was a carefree and spontaneous and didn't require a lot of plan to get things done. Jill, however, did, and if her plan wouldn't follow exactly, she became hysterical and distraught. In spite of being married for 10 years, they did not seem to recognize their personality differences. Let's assume Jack's personality type is a square and Jill's personality type is a circle. When I asked them if they could turn a square into circle or circle into square, they respond simultaneously. It's impossible. Then I said, let's assume that square Jack cannot change circle Jill. What could he do to adapt to her differences? Jack expressed that he needed to closely follow Jill's plan. If changes were needed, he would contact Jill first. What would Jill do to adapt to Jack's differences? She said she needed to be more flexible. Jack didn't mean to hurt her. He was trying to help. They could simply text each other to double-check ahead of time to make sure the plans hadn't changed. Once they accepted each other's differences, they were able to work out a way to adapt to the differences. Again, this is like Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle. Once they stopped trying to change each other, they got along much better. Now let's look at another hypothetical couple, Ben and Carol Johnson. Ben is an extrovert and he likes to talk early in the morning, all day long, and late at night. Sometimes he even talks without thinking. Carol is an introvert, and while she enjoys meaningful conversations, she likes quiet mornings, enjoys thinking about her upcoming day without interruption. Let's go to Johnson's house. At exactly 5 a.m., the alarm goes off and Ben jumps out of his bed. Immediately, he started talking about his day, the people at work who bothered him. He reminded Carol to pick up his laundry and bake cookies for an office party. Within 30 minutes, the two of them are yelling at each other. She views his babbling as being a nag, and he views her silence as being distant.
Stop talking. I can't take this anymore. Leave me alone.
What is wrong with you? Don't you care about me anymore?
They could not understand why they had so many arguments and why those arguments often took place in the morning. After telling them the Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle story and introduced them to that concept, they realized they could not change each other. The only one they could change was themselves. Ben accepted that Carol needed quiet time in the morning. If he thought of something for her to do, he would leave a note on the refrigerator, and Carol would try to fit his request into her schedule. Sometimes Ben would come home for lunch while the kids were at school so they could talk. This concept helped them realize they were acting exactly like Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle. By accepting each other's differences, fighting ceased, and they became more peaceful with each other. They also understood the concept that fixers don't win. They only get frustrated when things don't go their way, and it can lead to bitterness and broken relationship.
Fixers between parents and children.
Another most natural fixer dynamic relationship is with parents and their children. Let's look at a hypothetical situation. 7-year-old Katie was brought into counseling by her mother, who gave the daughter homework every night so she would be successful in school. The mother had dreamed of Katie becoming an engineer because she herself could not pursue engineering after she got pregnant. Katie rebelled because none of her friends had to do homework and she wanted to play after school. They thought about this every evening. Assume Mom was a circle and Katie was a square. I gave Katie an inflatable plastic circle and an inflatable plastic square and asked her to figure out how to change a circle into a square and a square into a circle. She pushed the corner in, they bounced right back out. She pushed the circle out to make corners, but the circle would not stretch. After a while, she said she could not do this. You're right, I told her. Is it possible to change your mother into square like you? She responded, no. I said, so if your mother is not going to change, you still have to do homework. Can you come up with some creative way to do homework so it would be fun? And let me know about it next week. When she came back, she said, doing homework was fun. I dressed up like Cinderella and I made her did all the homework for me. It was fun. Katie had learned to adapt to her mom and find creative ways to deal with different point of view. The theme is the same over and over again. When fixers try to change characteristics that are innate to a person, they make everyone around them miserable.
Fixers in school settings.
Mr. Brown was having a hard time teaching the 5th grade social study class because Jenny was talking to her friends. He stopped in the middle of the lesson and lectured Jenny why it was important to be a good listener. But before long, she forgot and started chatting again. In the next hour, Miss White came in to teach math. And again, Jenny was talking to a friend during class. Miss White did not yell or lecture Jenny. Instead, she stopped talking and looked at Jenny with a firm smile. When Jenny realized what happened, she looked at Miss White and said, sorry, Miss White, and she stopped talking for the rest of the class. Why did Jenny react to Mr. Brown and Miss White differently? Mr. Brown was puzzled why Jenny had trouble in his class but no trouble in Miss White's class. I explained to Mr. Brown that Jenny's personality was different from his. Jenny was a feeler and Mr. Brown was a thinker. They were different shapes. Jenny did not respond to his logical thinking when he lectured her. However, she responded to Miss White's firm, affectionate smile because Jenny wanted to please her. All kids respond differently to their teachers because of different shapes. It is natural for parents, teachers, and adults to be fixers of children, but sometimes the best intention can be misinterpreted and not well received. The challenge for adults is to know their children's shapes and work with them accordingly, rather than forcing them to be something they're not. By adapting to each other's differences, they find a way to connect with each other. You see, children as well as adults can also learn from Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle's story.
Fixers in a workplace.
Fixers are everywhere, at home, at school, and also in the workplace. Is your boss a fixer? Or are you a fixer that wants everything to be done your way? Let me share a hypothetical boss, Henry, who was encountering trouble with one of his employees. Henry had trouble working with Dan, an employee who had difficulties completing his work on time. He would start with one project and switch to another throughout the day, but he couldn't seem to finish anything on time. Henry had always been able to meet deadlines and therefore had no idea how to work with Dan. He didn't want to fire him, but what should he do? Henry knew how to budget his time and try to coach Dan, but the more he tried, the worse Dan got. Meanwhile, Dan became so overwhelmed thinking about the many projects lying ahead of him, but he couldn't concentrate on any one of them. It was like he was running in circles. I explained to Henry that he was expecting Dan to work the same way he worked. Assume if you were the square and Dan was the circle. Can you change the circle into square? I asked. Henry replied, No, I suppose not. I got the message. I need to change my approach to accommodate his. I said, We're getting somewhere. How do you do that? Henry thought for a moment. I could give him one project at a time with a due date. He did, and it worked. Once Henry recognized the shape of his employee's personality, he was able to help Dan complete his project. It would have been easy to assume that Dan was lazy and incompetent, but that was not the case. Dan had a wise boss who was able to see the real problem. In another office, Andrew was having a tough time with his boss, Margaret. Andrew was a good worker and had never had trouble before, but Margaret was unhappy about the reports he turned in, demanding much more details. It was causing him much stress. He wondered if he should find another job. You see, Andrew was a big picture person and had always written reports with the main ideas minus lots of details. But now his reports were rejected by Margaret, and it seemed that no matter how much time he spent writing them, he could not please her. I put his and Margaret's reports side by side and asked him to find the differences. Let's assume Margaret writes her report as a square, and Andrew writes his report as a circle. I asked him, how could he change a square into a circle? He said, it can be done. If you cannot change Margaret's way, how do you adapt to her way? Andrew thought, to adapt, I could put in more details on the report before turning it in. He tried that, and Margaret praised him for the report. Andrew had discovered what Margaret really wanted. He was able to accommodate her needs. If he had insisted on being like Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle, by trying to change his boss rather than changing himself, he would not be able to work with Margaret.
Fixers in a shopping mall.
At a food court in a shopping mall, let's observe some hypothetical interactions. Two ladies sat at the table having casual conversation over lunch. The lady with the white jacket said,
I have trouble with Mom lately. I like to stay after the service to talk to my friends, but my mom wants to leave immediately because she has millions of things to do afterward.
Her friend, Dr.Rita, listened. Don't you wish she would be more focused on here and now so she could enjoy the time too? Lady with the white jacket says.
Yes, that would be nice.
Dr. Rita said, assume that your mom is a square and you are a circle. Can you change her into a circle like you? The lady with the white jacket said.
I tried all these years and find it unsuccessful.
Dr. Rita continued, what can you do if your mom will not change? She thinks about many things you have to do in the future rather than focusing on the moment. The lady in the white jacket said,
Maybe if I take her home first, I could meet my friends at a restaurant. We could eat together and hang out.
Dr. Rita encouraged her and called the following week. The lady told her that worked. By not forcing her mother to change, adapting to her personality, she was able to easily change the situation. Here's another hypothetical situation. Sitting in another table, Joe and Tom were talking. Joe said, I have trouble with my wife. I want to spend time with her at night, but she's often too busy with the housework and kids. I feel very lonely in the marriage. I want to be closer to her emotionally. Tom said, I have the same problem. Maybe we could talk to my friend Dr. Rita and ask her for advice. When Joe came in, he explained his situation. His wife had a list of things to do and kids who needed attention, and she could not relax until everything was finished. But by then, she was too tired to spend time with Joe, and she had to go to bed. Joe was disappointed and felt very lonely. How much he wished his wife was more affectionate and gave him some time in the evening. Dr. Rita explained that his wife was task-oriented. Let's assume a task-oriented person like your wife is a square and you are a circle, she said. Can you change her into a circle? No way. If she's not going to change, that means she will continue to be task-oriented. What can you do to help her complete the task so she will have time to be with you? The next week, he came back and reported that he had tried a new way and it worked. As soon as he came home from work, he took a notebook and asked his wife how he could serve her. She felt so loved that he offered to help because that was her love language. All week, they worked together as a team, and after putting the kids to bed early, they were able to talk and watch TV. By accepting the way she was and making changes in himself, rather than expecting his wife to change, Joe discovered his wife's very affectionate side. They followed the principle of Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle, and it worked for them. By now, we've seen dynamics of fixers in home, school, workplace, and the shopping mall. I hope you have picked up on the general theme of this episode. You can see how each of these situations will resolve by following the principle of Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle. Let's look at the first principle. Changing another person to be like you is a dead-end road. You have no control whether the other person is willing to change. The person may change a little bit, but you can never change another one to be exactly like you. If we cut the corner off the square to make it more circular, but you haven't made a circle, instead you made a sorry-looking shape that doesn't have a name. What can you do? Since you cannot change another person, this leads to the second principle we learned from Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle story. When Mr. Green Square and Miss Green Circle stopped trying to change each other and focusing on changing themselves to accommodate the differences, they began enjoying each other. When Jim and Jane accepted the differences, they came up with a good plan for their fun weekends. When Jack and Jill, Ben and Carol accepted their different personality types and made changes to accommodate the differences, they got along much better. When Katie, the 7-year-old, stopped trying to change her mom, she came up with a creative way to do homework. Mr. Brown learned from Miss White that he needed to change to accommodate his students' personality differences. When Henry adapted to Dan's way of completing a task, Dan began succeeding at work. Andrew pleased his boss, Margaret, when he changed to her way of writing reports. The daughter who drove her mom to church found a way to accommodate her mom's different personality trait. She came up with a good plan that made each other happy. When Joe tried to meet his wife's needs rather than demanding his own, he found his wife was very affectionate and enjoyed spending time with him. As you can see, focusing on changing yourself rather than someone else has a much better outcome. God made us all different in many ways, yet one thing we share in common is that we are each precious in His sight. No one is better than another person. The Bible says, everyone who's called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. We're all created by God, so we try to change another person. That means we disagree with the Creator. If we try to change another person, we end up frustrated and disappointed. We won't be able to fix or change another person to be like us anyway. The person may change a little bit, but he or she bounces right back to the original shape in a short period of time. I'll leave you with one last thought. Changing someone else is not in your control, but changing yourself is. When you're willing to change yourself to adjust to someone's differences, you make the person feel special. This causes the person to please you more than you comprehend. If we all focus on how we could improve ourselves rather than changing someone else, people will be more likely to get along and the world will definitely be a better place. I hope this show has given you insight into a relationship. When you love God more than anyone else, you will not put so much expectations on others. Sometimes they can meet your needs, but most of the time they cannot. Let God fill your heart with His love. It is only a bonus when someone gives you something. You cannot count on them, you count on God. You'll be happier if you count on God alone. He's the only one who can love you unconditionally anyway, no one else can. When you're deeply loved by God, you do not require someone to change so you will feel better. You know you're loved, whether the other person change or not. Happiness comes from within yourself and God, not from others. Run to God and let Him love and adore you. I care for you and your concern is very important to me. You can call me at 517-332-6300 or email me at care@dr-rita.com. With your questions and prayer requests, I will address some of the questions in my future shows. It was great spending time with you. I hope this will give you insight into your relationship. I'll be praying for you until we meet again. See you soon.